So I remember when I was on the conference circuit in my previous career, and I'd be traveling a lot for business. Every now and then when we're at the dinner table, the topic of nutrition would come up because everybody seems to have, a dog in that fight. It's almost like in the secular world, it's akin to following a certain religion, right? So people would always weigh in with their, various opinions on what's the ideal diet. And what's really interesting is to see people who are otherwise extremely intelligent and successful in their chosen field be absolutely clueless when it comes to the practicality and implementation when it comes to nutrition. So like, for example, I'd remember there'd be certain colleagues who had recently found out that maybe they were on the verge of being, type 2 diabetic. And then they would go, full obsessive mode down these low carb rabbit holes, whereas the inclusion of carbohydrates in their diet was never their problem in the first place. Their problem was that they'd be massively overfeeding for weeks, months, and years on end as they go around doing all these different conferences, not exercising, being sedentary most of the time, and then also having all this accumulated stress of switching all these different contexts from constantly being traveling and on the road. They didn't actually need to go the other end of the extreme, to go the other end of the spectrum into the extremes and go for, some kind of low carb or zero carb diet. So I always found that really, really interesting. And I think this is a trap that a lot of us high performers fall into. We are problem solvers by nature, and we are also obsessive by nature. So sometimes in a bid to, solve a specific problem that's now become an issue in our lives, there's a tendency to overcorrect. And nutrition is definitely one of those areas where I see this all the time. And then what people do is they try to implement systems of eating or diets that are completely not sustainable for them for the rest of their lives. They do things like intermittent fasting, keto, paleo, even cutting out meat. And unless you're doing those for like specific allergies, health conditions, or a doctor has told you, or it's for, in the case of like veganism, it's for like ethical reasons. Unless it's one of these cases, it's completely unnecessary. Because every macronutrient in our intake generally forms some form of a purpose. I mean, carbohydrates are the body and the brain's main fuel source. Even the prefrontal cortex that's involved in task switching, motivation, willpower, achieving human goals, that's all powered by glucose, okay? Then you have, fats, which play a pivotal role in having optimal hormone balance. And then protein, of course, is essential for muscle repair, recovery, and even nerve function. So with all these different macronutrients providing different functions in the body, we don't really want to overcorrect and then cut any one of them out. That can be helpful in terms of an intervention, right? So if you look at any popular religion in recent times, they all include some form of constraints or like drastic constraints for a short period of time. It might be something like Lent in Christianity, it might be Ramadan in Islam, or there might be an exclusion in, like, say, Judaism to do with, to do with pork. Not an expert on theology. But what I do know is that I've tried a lot of these types of diets that are actually marketed a lot of the time as lifestyles when they're actually implementation methods, interventions, I should say. They're marketed as lifestyles, they're actually interventions. And in the short term, yes, they can be helpful, particularly if we look at something like cognition. Intermittent fasting or going low carb can have great cognitive benefits in the short term because you're kind of resetting that whole reward system in the brain, which is governed by dopamine, and dopamine also governs focus, attention, top-down control, task switching, executive functions. But in the long term, as your muscle glycogen stores go ever lower, and as you're, I guess, depriving yourself of any source of reward that you would have had before, which actually keeps that feedback loop of the reward system going, because it is a feedback loop, you actually need some rewards in there. Then what can happen, like when you get past 6, 8, 12 weeks, you can actually see that all those cognitive benefits you used to be getting, not only have they diminished, but you're actually getting worse in terms of your cognition. So I guess what I'm trying to say in this video is don't overcorrect. Don't completely dismiss how long the problem has been building up for. If it took a long time for the problem to accumulate, it's going to take a fairly substantial amount of time. Not as long, but it will take a substantial amount of time to change your habits for the long term. That should be done incrementally. It shouldn't be done where you're doing any form of drastic exclusionary diet. That can work for some people. I would say that even for the people it does work for, it's ever only in the short term. And you will often see that even the people who promote these very exclusionary diets, they don't stick with them for life. Many of the time, they actually move on to promoting a different type of exclusionary diet. You know, they go from being like a carnivore to saying, all right, now I'm a kind of paleo because I include fruits and berries. Or, you know, they may have been on intermittent fasting before, and now they say meat is actually the problem, right? They keep flip-flopping without actually addressing the root issue. The root issue for most people is that we now live in an environment where food and primarily quick sources of calories are overabundant. And if you are overfed for a sustained amount of time, right, you're chronically overfeeding, that's when all these issues happen to do with blood sugar control, insulin, blood cholesterol, inflammation, all these kind of chronic, I guess, conditions that come from chronic overfeeding. And what we really need to do is we need to come at a lifestyle that's sustainable in the long term so that we can, in the immediate term, get the body composition under control, so to reduce body fat levels, increase muscle mass, and then build a system of habits that actually keep fat off in the long term, and then can actually keep you in momentum throughout the rest of your life. We never want to hit a point where you say, I'm completely off the wagon, or I'll get started again on Monday. What we need to do is we need to form habits where you're essentially turning up and down a dial, like a dimmer switch, where maybe you start with, you know, tracking every day and 4 workouts per week. And then on a bad week, that turns into maybe skipping breakfast, intermittent fasting, getting in 1 or 2 workouts in a week, as just a method of keeping the momentum up on your busiest week, where maybe you're, I don't know, traveling, you're at a conference or something of that nature. We want to build a system of habits that are resilient, because if your lifestyle, and I'm going to put it in, you know, inverted commas, doesn't stand up to your busiest weeks, then it is not a lifestyle. It is just another flash in the pan, short-term intervention, which actually leads to you gaining all the weight back, and then maybe even overshooting the mark and gaining even more weight than when you started. If you found this helpful, make sure to check out the link in the description. You can sub to my email list there. I put out daily emails Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. where I am in Sofia, which is 7:30 a.m. GMT. And basically it's just the inner workings of my brain when it comes to everything to do with lifelong fat loss, body composition, performance in your chosen field as it relates to focus, attention, energy, and discipline. So sub there if you want to lose body fat whilst also increasing your performance in your chosen field. Wishing you a calm, productive, yet focused week ahead.